Jacaranda 94.2. How's it going? Hope you're having a nice day. This morning I opened the newspaper and read about those two amazing rhinos that I spoke to you about last week. Well, they are no more. They are dead. And I'm going to take some of your SMSs, mention those, some calls as well. So start dialing now, and I'll be back right after these.
In a country that's home to over 80% of the planet's rhino population, it's a message South Africans have woken up to over 7,000 times between 2008 and 2017. The tipping point for the species' survival has arrived, as one rhino is poached every 8 hours. We examine what's driving the illicit horn trade.
It started a couple of years ago when I helped them with the lion bones. And they couldn't speak English or negotiate with the farmers and stuff regarding the lion bones. They became more greedy and they found that rhinos would be more sort of payable for them to actually make quite a bit of money. And that's when they started hunting the rhinos. I got suspicious in the beginning when they used women to hunt, and the women didn't even have hunting clothes or anything. They couldn't even hold the rifles and stuff. So they had the permits and everything, and I thought, oh, well, let's just leave it out like that. And then the next minute, I received an order from Chamlong Thai for 50 rhinos where he claimed he can shoot 15 a month. And then I thought by myself, there's no ways that people can have so many trophies. This is more a question of harvesting. And that's when I decided to actually open it up.
The informant's tip-off not only leads to the arrest of rhino pseudo-hunt kingpin in South Africa, Chumlong Limtong Thai, but also starts to shed light on transnational organized crime syndicates' involvement in securing a rhino horn supply for a growing demand in Southeast Asia.
This case illustrated the ruthless ingenuity of transnational criminal networks trafficking rhino horn. And I think for many people in law enforcement, it was an eye-opening case to watch. It was certainly the one case that highlighted the lengths to which criminal networks would go to get their hands on rhino horn. No one could possibly have considered at the time that anyone would think of a scheme involving Thai prostitutes, obtaining their passports, getting them to pose as traditional big game hunters in order to obtain rhino horn for the black market. I think for many of the people in law enforcement who were looking at that case, that was quite a shock, that these were networks who would hatch schemes that you couldn't make them up in fiction.
3,000 kilometers north of the ground zero rhino killing fields in South Africa, Swiss wildlife crime investigator Karl sets off from his home in the foothills of Mount Kenya, en route to Southeast Asia. His mission? To establish what the drivers are behind the dramatic surge in rhino poaching. Karl's investigation starts in the traditional medicine shops of the old quarter in Hanoi. Traditional Chinese medicines, or TCM's pharmacopoeia, lists rhino horn as an ingredient in the preparation of antipyretics, a fever-reducing drug. The TCM traders were unhappy with a foreigner asking questions about a prohibited substance. And when the rejections became physical, the team withdraws.
Okay, I know you're fucking forward. No, don't.
TCM is as old as the Great Wall itself and has over 100,000 medicinal recipes recorded in the ancient literature.
因为现在呢，所有的大夫都知道，我们需要保护野生动物，不能再用这个。
Rhinoceros horn is indeed a type of Chinese medicine. The traditional classic prescription, 西郊地黄汤, contained rhinoceros horn, and was used to treat fever. The Chinese government issued a prohibition in 1993 to ban medical use of rhinoceros horn. Since then, we do not use it in Chinese medicine anymore. All the doctors in China are aware of wildlife protection. No doctors with qualifications prescribe medicine containing rhinoceros horn.
If the night market in downtown Beijing is anything to go by, the government's banning of trade in endangered species is certainly not being enforced. Starfish, baby sharks, seahorses and scorpions are all available, prepared for eating on the spot or as a take-home.
On our first trip to Vietnam, we started by calling on some traditional Chinese medicine dealers and shops in Hanoi. We asked about rhino horn and rhino horn products, realized soon we were not going to get very much information without money changing hands. So we pretended we had some health issues, or our relatives had health issues, and we were looking for specific cures, including rhino horn.
With our fixer as translator, we again approached TCM dealers in the old quarter of Hanoi. The asking price at the time was $20,000 per kilo of African horn and $40,000 for Asian horn. When a dealer chopped off part of what was being sold as rhino horn and pieces scattered all over the sidewalk, it raised the question, would they handle gold or cocaine this way when rhino horn is of higher monetary value? A covertly recorded discussion with a dealer raised an even bigger question about the authenticity of the rhino horn sample we had bought. In many ways, Vietnam epitomizes the anomalies of Southeast Asia, clinging on to ancient cultures and traditions while trying to find expression in a modern, Western-influenced society. One of the ways in which the nouveau riche express their wealth is through one-upmanship, showing off status symbols as their token of rank in society.
There's no single market for rhino horn. Rather, there are a number of parallel markets. Some of them have been born from urban myth mixed with ancient traditional medicinal beliefs, and that includes the use of rhino horn for its perceived medicinal properties to treat a range of ailments, including cancer. But more recently, there's also been the evolution of a market, a consumer market driven by wealthy consumers looking for rhino horn as a status symbol, as a piece of jewelry. In some cases, people either buying up the whole horns or rhino horn being manufactured into an array of different products.
John Hume owns over 1,600 rhino. His security costs are astronomical, employing teams of highly trained anti-poaching units, helicopters, and a host of electronic surveillance equipment to protect his herd. To date, his security investment has paid dividends.
We have not had a poaching here for 15 months. That's a record since our first poaching, a record by far. But unless I sell rhino horn, it's not sustainable. The security is now costing me more than everything else put together, all the other running costs. So you take all the managers, all the bakkies, all the tractors, all the food, which the rhino eat a few thousand ton a year, all of that comes to about the same as the security. It's not sustainable.
The high cost of security has had a knock-on effect on the sale of rhino at wildlife auctions. Not only is there a reluctance to own them, but 70 of the 400 registered rhino breeders in the country have given up on breeding rhino. A total of 200,000 hectares of conservation area has been lost. Since the CITES trade ban of rhino horn products in 1976, it's estimated that over 100,000 rhino have been lost to poaching. The Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species of Fauna and Flora, known as CITES, is an international agreement between 183 governments or parties. Its aim is to ensure that international trade in specimens of wild flora and fauna does not threaten their survival.
There is hardly any more unprofitable business on the planet than poaching.
At the CITES COP17 meeting in Johannesburg, Swaziland tabled a motion to legalize the trade in rhino horn. The parties dismissed the motion with an overwhelming majority, under pressure from animal rights activists who make a comfortable income from operating these anti-trade lobby groups.
The animal rights motivated NGOs have come to the fore quite a lot. They have had quite a big influence, and it is evident from how they conduct themselves that they are the people who collect the most money. They are in funds, whereas the NGOs who are traditionally aligned with sustainable use do not have the money. Now, the explanation for that, in my opinion, is quite simple. It is driven by an emotional public, an emotional Europe, an emotional first world, America, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, where people do not see what goes on the ground in Africa. And they feel an emotional obligation to donate money to people who claim to be in favor of animals and animal protection.
Aside from being opposed to any trade in animals whatsoever, animal rights organizations believe that legalizing trade will increase demand.
I don't believe that's the case because, as you say, a lot of people, especially in the East, it's the illegalness that actually attracts them.
And as that might now play out in the context of ivory as well. If the Chinese say no more domestic ivory sale, that makes it so much more attractive for some of them. But you know, with rhino horn, it was outlawed 1993 in China, the domestic market, and look what's happened.
And look what's happened, exactly.
I mean, the pressure has not come down.
We're on the wrong track, and if you look back, every time it was pressure of less and illegal that pushed the price up, and pushed the price down is the rumor of legality. That's a fact.
They say we took the dip back to the fact.
Wei Ji is an independent wildlife researcher based in China.
We talked about rhino horn having been outlawed in '93, right? The domestic trade. Now, but the poaching pressure today in Africa is, in Asia too, to some extent, is as high as it has ever been. So do you think that's going to happen with ivory? I mean, once the ivory trade stops, is the rhino horn trade symptomatic what happened to it since '93 for what might happen with ivory? Once you outlaw it, there might be even more demand because being illegal gives it an additional status.
I think for the rhino poaching, the rise, I think the stark rising of rhino poaching, to my point of view, is due to the ban of South Africa domestic market. Because before that, within South Africa, people will think it's okay if we buy rhino horn domestically. But when people get it, they export illegally. So it means that these backdoor export, especially from the private sector, without any documentation, then it goes illegally out of South Africa. This part of supply actually satisfied some demand, to my understanding. With the ban of South Africa domestic market, people within South Africa, now they know it's illegal to do so. Buyers dare not to do it as before. So the backdoor supplies goes down, the demand goes to poaching.
Just how much rhino horn is revered was demonstrated during our next visit to the TCM shops in the Old Quarter in Hanoi.
So this is a special plate to cut rhino horn.
It was the Vietnamese Tet or New Year's season, and after we bought our piece of horn, the shop owner and his wife invited us upstairs to their living quarters for a glass of rice wine.
But ask him once, he hear about the minister who got cured of cancer?
Anh có nghe cái vụ Bộ trưởng Việt Nam mình uống
Stomach cancer. And he got cured.
Yeah.
Towards the end of our visit, the wife retrieved a package from a shelf and offered us all some rhino horn powder to sprinkle into our wine. It seems that this is what you do with honored guests or customers.
Oh, I see, this is the key.
Go into the wine.
The samples we got hold of were tested at the veterinary genetics lab at the University of Pretoria by Dr. Cindy Harper.
So out of the samples we received, 3 were actual rhinoceros horn. The rest of the samples were made up of bovine, so which is cattle, sheep, some were sager antelope, so there were various species other than the actual rhinoceros horn.
With only 15% of the samples that we'd collected from TCM traders proving to be rhino, it was clear that at the retail level, a lot of fake products are being sold. On the next visit to Vietnam, we confronted some of the traders with our doubts about what they were offering. We asked them how we could differentiate between the real thing and all the fakes which the market seemed to be flooded with. A raft of test methods was demonstrated, from being a pinkish color when a strong light was shone through the rhino horn pieces, to the material being softer when cut, or the color of the liquid when dissolving the horn powder, and even more bizarre, the sound when tapping with a fingernail. What became clear at this point was that up to 90% of the rhino horn products offered at the retail level that we obtained samples of are fake. But fake wildlife product offerings take on an entirely different dimension in the Guangzhou market. We'd invited a young couple from Hong Kong to join us on a market tour to provide some insight on how the younger generation views these products. The sheer volume and variety of products on offer was a startling reminder of a very real threat to endangered species survival, and begged the question whether these replicas in fact fueled the demand for the genuine article. Even a really bad replica of an African antelope had made it into the display room.
So thanks for coming from Hong Kong to Guangzhou. So, first impression, what do you think about the trade here in wildlife or supposed wildlife products?
I just know why they need it. And I don't know who will buy this.
So they want to buy counterfeit products to pretend that they are that wealthy.
Okay, it's a status symbol.
Yeah, and
still people in your generation which think that way, or is it only the older generation?
I don't think it is that common for our generation.
Like in my home, they still have ivory chopsticks, though they stopped from using it.
My parents also.
Yeah, but they still consume some traditional Chinese medicines, like blood from donkeys.
And some sort of, like, you eat the animal parts to compensate what you lack in your parts, you know. Okay. This is the Chinese thinking.
Like jelly that made from the shell of turtles.
Right.
Something like that.
Oh, I used to eat it a lot. Tortoise jelly. Tortoise jelly. Because
did it help you or not?
Honestly, it did help. It did help.
So I think it is the herbal part.
It's a herbal part, though.
Yeah.
I don't know what it makes it with, like the turtle jelly together with some herbs. But then after I get the whole thing, I feel better.
Is it just the older generation, or do you think this culture will go on?
It will go on, but the scale may not be that big.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm very sure everything will go online. I don't think anyone will just go here shopping anymore. My generation don't do shopping in shops.
Our Vietnamese fixer had been tipped off about a small village outside of Hanoi where we could find illicit wildlife products processing plants. Some unusual taxidermy displayed on the sidewalk led to the first plant that produced fake hunting trophies. cow skin pulled over cow skull molds, and an array of cow and antelope horns crudely attached was on offer along with fake elephant ivory. The introduction to the fake trophy production was a revelation as to just how little was known in the West about the demand characteristics of these types of products. After the proverbial tea ritual, we inquired about rhino horn products. The owner claimed he had none in stock, but we were welcome to place an order. By the sound of it, the tip-off given to our fixer was showing potentially valuable signs. We decided to troll the rest of the village. The buzz of electrical workshop equipment guided us to a disused temple. Alongside woodwork machinery, a row of workers were producing fake rhino horns. The owner hastily pointed out that they do not produce fake rhino horns, but artifacts that look like rhino horns. The fact that some dealers that they supply pass them off as the real thing was not their concern. Morty and the factory owner's wife told us about the volume of imitation horns sold.
Horns she sells to the Chinese a year.
So from mid of last year until today, until this year, Chinese come to buy a lot. Some hundred, about less than 1,000 a year.
The Bush Telegraph was working overtime in Nikkei. As we left the workshop, our fixer was approached by a motorbike rider who directed him to a nearby shop that stocked the wildlife products we had asked about. The volume and variety of product was alarming. Raw tusks and semi-worked items, along with end consumer products. In another section of the shop, a group of Chinese tourists were bargaining a bulk discount for ivory bangles. And then an unsolicited offer of what we were searching for: a rhino horn karma bracelet, along with the locally recognized test method for authenticity. With the knowledge that Nikkei was indeed a trading center, we returned to Hanoi to plan our next move in the village. Visiting antique shops in Hanoi in search of rhino horn proved rewarding immediately. We were offered rhino horn tip seals, probably an adaptation of the ivory signature seals from Japan, that were also on offer. Another indicator that none of the status symbol wildlife products are sold in isolation. Ivory, rhino horn, tiger cake and skin, pangolin scales, and even tiger bone jewelry. All banned products and all abundantly available at a premium. Another surprising aspect was how open the trade of horn had now become, and how little concern there was about the enforcement of wildlife trafficking laws. Our fixer had no problem finding 35 contacts on the internet offering rhino horn and horn pieces for sale. Contact with the advertisers via telephone was uncomplicated. Of the 10 samples bought using this approach, all tested fake, despite assurances to the contrary.
Okay. How much cost?
Industries supporting the rhino horn trade are also blossoming, like the manufacture of rhino horn grinding bowls. Made from clay with a serrated inside base and spout, rhino horn is ground by rubbing it against the base. Water added to the powder and then drunk. We found an upmarket version made out of Japanese clay. The brochure shows an image of a rhino, and the manufacturer's website informs prospective buyers that rhino horn cures incurable diseases. The Japanese model was upstaged by a motorized version, a whole industry developed around the use of rhino horn and the fake retail market associated with it. While filming in Vietnam, the neighboring country of Laos often came up in conversations as a transit country for a wide range of illegal wildlife products from Africa and other parts of Asia. Laos has a long land border with Thailand, Vietnam and China. This, together with an overall poor quality of governance, makes it an ideal smuggling hub. Basic web research revealed that the country's most prominent dealer, Mr. Wisei Keosavang, owner and CEO of Zaisavang Trading, operates from the small town of Paksan, about 200 kilometers south of the capital, Vientiane. We made it a priority to speak to Mr. Keosavang as his company's address appeared on the shipping documents of illegal wildlife products that range from snakes to ivory. He refused to receive us at his residence, but agreed to a meeting at our hotel. During a covert video recording, we presented him with the shipping documents implicating his company.
Basically what he said was that he only did legal business on behalf of the Laotian government, that he was not involved in any illegal activities, not involved in any kind of lion bone or rhino horn trading, and that he was building a safari park, and in that context he wanted to buy wildlife from Africa. That, of course, contradicts what one reads on the internet, which I mentioned to him, and he said he doesn't care what's on the internet, it's all lies. People are using his name and the name of his company. However, on Friday, we recorded him on hidden camera in his home, 200 kilometers from here, where he did offer the undercover guy any rhino horn he could deliver from the Burma side. Did you tell him that there's a piece of rhino horn in your area?
Yes, and he interested, but just make sure it's
real.
The real one.
So how much did he offer?
If the real one is from India or Burma, it's 1 kilo about 40,000 US.
Okay. So clearly there are two sides to the man, two sides to his company, and clearly there's all kinds of stuff going on here.
Mr. Keosavang, as his business card shows, is also the Deputy Chairman of Commerce for the district and the Vice President for the Laos Swimming and Boxing Association. He used to run a large government trading company, and there are rumors that Zaisavang Trading is also partially government-owned, and that he still has an official position within military intelligence. The US State Department has offered $1 million reward on information that would lead to the Zaisavang syndicate's dismantling. He had become known as the Pablo Escobar of wildlife trafficking. Karl pays US Ambassador Clooney a visit to brief him on his recent experience in attempting to meet Keosavang. International pressure seems to be one of the only effective tools in combating wildlife crime at this level.
I'm glad to hear that the announcement of the reward has had some positive effect. It was the very first reward announced under this transnational crime reward program, and the fact that Secretary Kerry decided to use wildlife trafficking as the very first use of this tool shows the importance that we place on the problem.
Before leaving Laos, we did try to contact the head of the CITES Management Authority to ask about the status of players like Mr. Wisei Keosavang and discuss the country's track record in terms of compliance with the convention.
I'm going to see here the head of CITES authorities from Laos. I met him in Doha last year and asked him for an interview, and he told me to come and see him in Vientiane. I called him once before when I was here, and he told me, sorry, I won't be in the office. The same thing happened again yesterday. He says he's in the south. We came to his office. Originally they said he's here and he has just walked out, and now they're telling us no, he's in the south. So something is not right here.
Laotian CITES officials don't seem to have a problem giving interviews while attending conferences in the region. But then again, questions posed at these events seldom address the realities of accountability for not complying with wildlife trafficking laws.
CITES connects international commitments with national action. Criminals must be stopped. We know the way. We now need the collective will. Right here, right now in Bangkok, is when we must come together to turn the tables on serious wildlife crime.
CITES has a very powerful compliance mechanism that it can use to ensure effective implementation. And of course, if a country fails to implement the convention effectively, these tools are mobilized.
Mr. Scanlon, the Secretary General, tells us what's going to happen in the near future in terms of enforcement. Now we're back here in the Mekong 3 years later. Laos has been one of the ultimate basket case when it comes to non-compliance with the CITES Convention on a wide range of fronts, from reptiles to ivory to rhino horn to tiger farming, you name it, it goes on in Laos. Now we're here 3 years later, we're assessing what has changed or is changing, and the reality is it's gotten worse.
But I asked the local people, who is their customer? They said only the Chinese people, because a lot of people not buy like ivory, like the jewelry that Chinese people they bring. They know it's Chinese product.
We hear of a lot of these shops now having gone to Chinese ownership, 10 years lease being paid up front to the tune of $200,000, $300,000. And as such, they're really taking over much of these towns, even hotels and so on. With this commerce comes, of course, the trade in commodities like ivory and rhino horn. There's a lot more in the shops here than ever before. Okay, we're in the middle of Luang Prabang, the little police station over there. Empty at the moment, probably on lunch break, but 20 yards away, a lot of ivory for sale in a shop which used to be owned by a nice Laotian family, had a lot of good souvenir products, even real antiques. I did buy things there. Now been taken over by Chinese, now full of ivory, hundreds of pieces. Filmed them with hidden camera this morning. Very interesting, a typical Chinese buyer coming in, having some pieces weighed in front of him, ivory bangles and so on, taking pictures with his iPhone, pictures transmitted to some friends or potential customers in China, waiting a few minutes, phone call coming in with a decision how many they wanted, obviously at a given price, and then the transaction was completed. But in addition to the ivory, he then also seems to have asked for rhino horn. There was a slab of about this size, brown in a plastic envelope. It went on the scale. The price was negotiated. The phone came out, picture taken. The offer was transmitted to China. So this is now a pattern. I'm told all these shops along the main road here are going into Chinese hand. We just visited one old contact of mine, a guy who has a shop, an elderly man, and sells kind of souvenir items, but also antiques, and who has rhino horn and stuff for a long time, and obviously he trusts me to some extent. He gives me price levels and so on. So this morning I showed him pictures of what is a fake set of rhino horns, which I have in Kenya, and asked him what I could get here.
When people said me about he buy about 30 US dollar on
kilo. He admitted that we probably could get $28,000 to $30,000 a kilo, and that whoever the buyer was will probably be able to sell it in Vietnam or in China for $40,000. So that seems to be the profit margin at the moment. Hasn't changed from 3-4 months ago when we asked similar questions. We will now cross-check it in other locations as well. But in the end, he actually pulled out some pieces he hadn't shown me before. He says he got them a long time ago. I doubt they were just small rhino horn pieces, which obviously are for grinding down. I'm not sure if it's real or not. I will take some pieces back for DNA analysis again to see what the outcome is.
Traveling between smaller towns in Southeast Asia is usually quickest using the river transport, either by water taxi or by what the locals call a fast boat. A motor car engine mounted in a flimsy hull with a direct drive to a propeller. We'd witnessed the volume of boat traffic in and around the main cities in the region. But the remoteness of villages dotted along the Mekong highlighted just how hopeless a task it is for authorities to try and enforce wildlife trafficking laws along this 4,500 kilometer long highway. Still in Laos, some 500 kilometers upstream from Luang Prabang, in what is euphemistically called a special economic zone, is the King's Roman Casino. If anything epitomizes the hopelessness of enforcing wildlife trafficking laws, then this is it. Typical of the special economic zones in the region, anything and everything is for sale. King's Roman is a casino town, situated right in the center of the notorious Golden Triangle, where the borders of Thailand, Myanmar and Laos meet. Gambling, drugs and prostitution is the name of the game. A sin city for an elitist and exclusive Chinese clientele. Gambling is strictly prohibited in China, but wealthy Chinese are welcomed as VIPs after flying into Thailand and crossing the Mekong, with no customs or immigration procedures followed. Gambling brings in the big money, which drives all the activities at King's Roman, and the rich clients arrive in droves. It is part of China in every way, except for national laws and geographic location. All the Chinese cash flowing in over the Mekong also boosts the illegal trade in wildlife and wildlife products.
There is a lot of rhino horn products, including a lot of libation cups and some very big cuts of rhino horn from leftovers from making libation cups and other artifacts and jewelry. So it is a big player. For a while it had all disappeared upstairs after EIA made an issue out of this shop and some of the others. Now it's all back to square one. And as I said, we have one sample from here, so let's see how it tests out against the Rhodes database.
Conveniently close to the casino, there's another tourist attraction that openly offers ivory and a host of other illegal wildlife cocktails for sale, including wine made from tiger parts for a mere $600 US. Called a zoo, but in reality an illicit tiger breeding center that supplies both live and dead tigers to a banned market for tiger wine, tiger cake, tiger bone jewelry, skins, and for those that celebrate big wins at the casino, a chance to eat tiger flesh. At nightfall, we managed to smuggle our covert camera into the casino to record any illicit wildlife products that might be on offer. After inquiring about rhino horn, we were politely shown to an open display of illegal wildlife products. High-quality tiger teeth, ivory, and rhino horn for sale. Also the first time we'd encountered a rhino horn wedding ring selling for a mere $100 US per gram. Clearly the casino outlet catered for the big rollers that frequented the establishment.
How about how much per gram?
50.
We were also offered rhino horn shavings after asking about medicine. Difference in price between the finished article and the byproduct once again confirmed what market is targeted.
For drinking?
Yes.
Good for them.
it's $25, and this was $120. So again, illustrates again what's going on here. Both rhino horn, and this is a byproduct of making this. And the money is made with this stuff, the finished product, not with the shape.
Another first in our 6-year research was finding out that the black center core of a horn is more highly regarded than the outer, lighter colored material. According to the salesman, this is where the beast's life force is situated, so it has better karma for the owner. Selling at $180 a gram, we very much doubted whether the casino operators would allow fake rhino horn to be passed off to their wealthy clientele. But only DNA tests run at the Veterinary Genetics Lab, South Africa, would prove that.
But when it comes to the artifacts, it looks like we're looking mostly at real stuff, right? I think out of this set of samples, pretty much all is real, right?
Yeah, unlike the first samples we got, these samples, the majority are now real.
Obviously, these are shavings from the floor. Obviously, they clean the floor at regular intervals because it's stuff they don't want to throw away. So in this particular case, it's one bag of shaving which clearly had 3 different rhino in it. And so the assumption has to be that they're going through several horns in a matter of 2 or 3 days.
Well, it seems like the problem is bigger than anybody imagines, and it's quite sad that nothing is being specifically done about that, because what it tells me is that where one looked previously, obviously they were mostly fakes, but now with the real item, you're looking in the right places. These are the real dealers. And as far as I'm concerned, people should be doing something about it.
But environmental conservation issues are not high on the agenda in a country where there's 35% unemployment, and the ex-president faces nearly 800 charges of corruption and fraud, while chaos swirls around the nation's law enforcement agencies and their vulnerability to political manipulation. The only time people in the rural environmental protected areas are contacted by authorities is close to elections, and their only perceived benefit from the wildlife they're asked to protect is a free lunch and t-shirt, along with the assurance that things will get better for the communities that live in isolation around these wilderness areas. Rural communities question the non-delivery of tangible benefits by government.
was nie regte ding nie. My pa mense hulle sokkel. Hulle beer in die veld. Hulle kry niks nie. Pa swart mense het geleer. Hulle soek job, hulle kry niks nie. Altyd honger. Soos ek is fitting and machining. N3. Overhead crane operator. Excavator. Maar my enige werk is die tuine. As nie tuinwerk nie, ons moet by die bos gaan bly. Sokkel net. Ons moet krap by die dustbin. Government makes niks for ons nie. Sokkel.
But the majority of rural people have not been informed and are unaware of the unseen positive contribution that wildlife conservation has to many communities.
I spend 5 million rand a month here in running and feeding my animals. Almost every single rand there is spent locally, on local people. The people who work for us are way in excess of 100. They get a direct salary. We buy food for the rhinos from other people who grow that food. So their people work in their fields, they get paid from that. Our 5 million rand a month goes almost entirely to the local communities. We spend it almost entirely on South African.
did start collecting samples of what was sold as rhino horn very early on in our research. Many cases we went to the traditional Chinese medicine stores, and in many cases those samples turned out to be all fake. Once we started going to places which were selling artifacts and jewelry and catering to the top echelon of the buyers, we're spending the big money. Most of the samples turned out to be the real thing, but as of it now, when buying something like this, we really have no clue if we're buying more buffalo horn or more rhino horn. However, since in the past some of this sampling has resulted in question marks about the chain of custody and how we manage to protect it on our various trips and travels and crossing borders, this time we have official authority to bring the rhino horn samples back to a DNA lab in South Africa, which maintains the poached rhino horn database. The lab can establish which rhino it was, when it was poached, where it was poached, who owned it, and that obviously might help also with enforcement issues.
South Africa's Kruger National Park, home to more than 70% of the planet's white rhino, is also where most poaching takes place. Ranger training has been adapted to face this new challenge.
The philosophy now is to take the fight to the poachers, not to be reactive, but rather to find the poacher before he kills the animal.
The South African Army has been mobilized to bolster anti-poaching operations, bringing in drones, and there's talk about reconstructing the fence line which used to exist between the Kruger Park and a so-called protected area across the border in Mozambique.
People tend to say because an ex-general has taken command that he would call it a war. It is a counterinsurgency war we're fighting here. We have up to 2 armed incursions a day, over 80 a month sometimes. Last year we were involved in about 60 firefights. On top of that, we had 108 other sightings that did not result in a firefight. These people come in armed, they come in illegally, they plunder our natural resources and they exit illegally. And I think that is equal to a war.
Another proactive initiative is to move rhino to IPZs, intensive protection zones, away from poaching hotspots in the park. While some rhino are even relocated to African range states in what's called ex situ conservation management. The black rhino population expansion program sees these animals airlifted to safer ranges, away from porous border areas of the Kruger National Park. In an attempt to dissuade poachers, rhino are dehorned. This harmless procedure is carried out under anesthesia and the horn regrows. But the strategy is not foolproof, and even dehorned rhino are poached for the stub. By law, every time a rhino is treated, DNA samples have to be taken for submission to the genetics lab in Pretoria and placed on their database. We devised a plan to isolate the location of the main rhino horn processing plants in Nikkei, the small village outside of Hanoi we'd visited previously. Our local informants were adamant that this was the entrepot for horn flowing into Southeast Asia. By installing a series of concealed camera traps throughout the village and observing the movement of visitors, we located our first target. Rhino horn was being processed into a myriad of artifacts on an industrial scale. A range of rings, libation cups and bracelets. The business had evolved into an internet-based marketing model as well. Buyers could select a product from a web-based sales catalog, pay a deposit, and in an hour, view the goods before purchasing. The dealers said that the majority of clients were Chinese. Using our covert camera, we recorded a large horn being measured and cut up to a client's specifications. And the trafficker taking delivery of a bangle along with the center core from the manufacturing process.
I want to buy something so they get some money, and then I want to go upstairs and see who is working on it. And it's exactly 5 weeks ago that I provided the details of this dealership outside Hanoi to Interpol. They insisted that I give them all the information without any conditions, and they got them, including the maps. How to find the place. Now 5 weeks later, I just spoke to my guy in Hanoi. He has been back to the place and absolutely nothing has changed.
CITES is quite a unique convention in that sense, because it actually has compliance measures that makes provision to take very strict action against countries that don't implement CITES effectively. It could go as far as a full ban of all trade in CITES-listed species from that country. And that tool is very often used. It's been used in the past year. A number of countries has been suspended for trade related to activities they were requested by the CITES Standing Committee to implement and which they didn't.
CITES, the international trade regulatory body, has yet to use its enforcement mechanisms to call influential nations that repeatedly violate wildlife trade laws to task. The political fallout from major offenders such as China appears to be one of the barriers preventing it from complying with its mandate.
A small, tiny group of people win is an enormous economic loss to society, and tourism, ladies and
The emotional trauma experienced by professional teams that rescue and rehabilitate calves orphaned by poaching is not completely understood.
So she came in about 3:30, 4 o'clock on Thursday, and she was brought in with the vet by a helicopter. So she landed here and we transferred her very quickly then to our unit here. And then she continued with sort of emergency treatment that she required. So she was sedated at this stage, but she had to have fluid therapy and things like that because she'd gone at least a 24-hour period of being on her own, unable to drink from her mother, being very stressed, running around, becoming dehydrated in the heat. She's very thin and emaciated. She'd become increasingly more stressed. She started pacing. She was calling for her mother, which is just horrific to listen to. And she's going round and round, pacing back and forth, and then she spooked and she smashed into every wall.
But the young calf turns out to be a fighter and pulls through. She's christened Masangita, a local tribal name for miracle. Within a month, she's introduced to the other orphans at the Rhino Revolution Rehab Center. It's been nearly 2 years since the start of her rehabilitation, and it's become time for her to be released back into the wild. The first trials of releasing rehabilitated calves back into an intensive protection zone is scheduled for this year. wildlife vets having to treat survivors of botched poaching attempts in the field has become commonplace. Bone fragments were successfully removed from a gunshot wound to the shoulder. Fortunately, no vital organs were hit. The brutality of poaching becomes evident when animals whose horns are hacked off right into the paranasal cavity are treated. Saving the Survivors is an NGO that specializes in maxillofacial surgery for these survivors.
So what we'll do now is we'll just dress it with wound dressings, specifically medical grade honey, calcium alginate, and then we're going to cover it. Any wound heals better if it's covered. You know, we talk about so-called moist wound healing, so then we'll cover it with elephant skin and suture it around the edges. Elephant skin is the only product that I could find so far that is strong, pliable, and lightweight. I've tried, you know, several kind of plastics and polymers and stuff. The only thing so far that works is elephant skin or, you know, any kind of skin.
There's been a remarkable recovery rate of animals treated by the team. When specialized surgery is required, animals are transported to the University of Pretoria's Animal Hospital Intensive Care Unit. The sentiments around this emotional crisis encourage donors to contribute generously. Some projects appear to capitalize on the vulnerability of the situation, like the poison horn debacle. The Dutch postcode lottery paid out 14 million euros, part of which was to fund a project based on the claim that rhino horn could be infused with poison, making it unusable for consumers.
De neushoornhoornen, moet ik zeggen, behandelen met een chemisch middel.
The treatment was demonstrated to international media, who hailed it as the silver bullet to save rhino.
The ectoparasiticide is normal organophosphates and pyrethroids, something similar to what you would use on cattle. The boy is unhappy. Cattle and livestock, something similar to what you would use on your pets at home to treat them against ticks and fleas.
The horn is drilled and an untested chemical infused into the horn under pressure. This rhino, being used as a guinea pig, dies during the demonstration. Soon afterwards, recovered horns from poached rhino whose horns had been treated revealed that no chemical dye was visible outside the drilled holes. The discredited NGO was forced to return part of the funding once it was established that rhino horn cannot be infused.
Certainly, some of those horns have ended up in these end-use markets, but there's a whole range of products that are being created out of rhino horn. And, you know, if you've got a little cavity in the middle of your horn that is discolored, look, they're making bracelets, they're carving things out of horn. That would be very easy just to work around.
Rhino horn scamsters in a South African frontier town with Zimbabwe have a far more rudimentary ruse. Using wire to form the shape and a cow horn as the tip, auto body repair putty is used to mold a false horn. A few days in a plastic packet with rotting flesh to add authenticity, and the horn is ready to be fenced for around $15,000 US. We're told there's no shortage of buyers.
If you're buying rhino horn, you may be paying for more than just horn. You're paying for guns, bullets, poison arrows, chainsaws, axes, and machetes to hack off the face of the rhino. And you are paying for the life of a beautiful creature. So please tell your friends and relatives, never buy products made from rhino horn. When the buying stops, the killing can too.
Some rhino horn demand reduction campaigns cleverly target the real buyers of rhino horn status symbols. However, quantifying the effectiveness remains a holy grail.
And the chi means strength comes from within.
Là người yêu những cái đẹp, tôi không thể chấp nhận được sự hủy hoại những cuộc sống tự nhiên của loài tê giác.
And we're saying the businessmen who are the biggest rhino horn consumers in Vietnam, which also includes, unfortunately, government officials. We tell them that they don't need another substance to be strong, wealthy, and have status. It comes from within.
Some NGOs make unquantifiable claims of demand reduction successes based on unsound research methodology. Donor agencies keen to be part of a successful campaign continue to support these questionable campaigns, seldom asking why there's an increase in rhino poaching numbers if the demand reduction campaign is succeeding. Eager to sustain the myth around the success of the money-generating demand reduction campaigns and the pretense of enforcing wildlife trafficking laws, the Vietnam government crushes and burns 2 tons of ivory and 70 kilos of rhino horn on the eve of the Hanoi Conference on illegal trade. The unintended consequence of the publicity stunt is the perception by end users that rhino horn and ivory is now even scarcer and the selling price on the black market increases.
There's a wildlife conference next week or in 2 days here. Prince William is arriving, a lot of big PR associated with it. So the story indeed is very, very different from any time before. All these shops I have been into, there was here lots of ivory, there were tiger bones, there was everything. Chinese customers coming and going, all gone, quiet, almost dead, the whole village. Yep. No, just keep recording now. Yeah, it's a total change. I mean, I've never seen this place as dead. Every single shop is closed and shuttered down. But I'm absolutely sure the Vietnamese enforcement authorities showed up here and told them shut everything down for 2 or 3 weeks. All the shops remain closed, and then we'll talk again. And I mean, it's a question of monitoring what's going to happen 6 months down the line. These people have earned tons and tons of money for the last 5-6 years with ivory and rhino horn. They all have nice houses. It's a very wealthy village now. They no longer even worry about their rice plantations. So they will go back to it if there's the slightest chance. And they will, because I don't think Vietnam is serious about clamping down.
This is about, this action started in London in 2014, and what came out of the London conference at the time was a series of commitments in the London Declaration, which then was followed by the Kasane Statement, which was followed by another series of commitments made at the highest levels of government as ways to tackle the illegal wildlife trade. And what we've decided to do with the Hanoi Statement is to welcome the actions that have been taken already to implement those commitments, but to really focus on implementing the commitments as a global community to make sure that we can, as a group, combat illegal wildlife trade.
So, in a nutshell, delegates from 54 countries attend the Hanoi Conference for 2 days to have talks about the ongoing talks that after 2 years have shown no results. Paradoxically, hunting rhino under strictly controlled conditions is allowed and provides a valuable contribution to conservation when properly practiced. A permitted rhino hunt is made up of the hunter, tracker and PH or professional hunter. A nature conservation official accompanies the party to ensure permit conditions are complied with. Only the permitted hunter may shoot the animal. If the hunter is in a life-threatening situation, the PH is allowed to kill it. Video evidence presented during the Chum Long Lem Tong Tai case revealed that none of the permit conditions were complied with, and yet the nature conservation official signed off the hunts as being compliant. To date, no remedial action against the conservation official has been taken. During interrogation, Thai sex workers whose passports were used to obtain permits for the pseudo hunts confirmed that they had never fired a shot.
No, I don't know. I not shoot. Yeah.
No shooting?
No.
Did you shoot one rhino or two? I mean, from your passport.
One lady, one rhino.
One lady, so you hunted 4 rhinos.
The Lem Tong Tai case turned into a media and animal rights activists' frenzy. In many people's minds, once Chum Long had been arrested, rhino poaching was something of the past. But the Zay Savang syndicate in Laos had other plans. Pupitak Chum Chong, also known as Peter, was sent to replace Lem Tong Tai. This time, the authorities had been tipped off. When he arrived in South Africa, he was arrested along with his partner, who was waiting for him at the airport. Peter appeared in court charged with traveling under a false name and was deported along with his partner. In the border town of Musina in the far north of South Africa, yet another illegal rhino trading court case had started. Davy Groenewald, wildlife ranch owner, and his wife, along with 10 others, including a veterinarian and a pilot, are facing 1,736 charges. They're dubbed the Musina Mafia. The temptation of a quick buck is irresistible, and a steady flow of rhino horn poachers, traffickers, and middlemen are arrested. And then a shocking revelation. A section ranger in the Kruger Park is arrested for rhino poaching. Landella was an executive member of South Africa's Game Rangers Association, and as a senior parks ranger had intimate intelligence on anti-poaching patrol movements. He and his co-accused, a veterinary sciences employee, also from Kruger Park, face multiple criminal charges.
Yeah, we need to understand that the problem is not coming from the park. It's coming from outside our boundaries, and it's an international problem. But inside the park, we'll do the best what we know in the bush to protect the place. But those channels from outside, they must be cut down. And we need serious interventions there in terms of neutralizing the organized crime.
Fast forward 5 years since the first court appearance. Groenewald and his co-accused, still out on bail, appear in the High Court in the nation's capital. He manages to get another postponement, but Interpol steps in and arrests him and his brother and requests an extradition order to the United States to be granted in compliance with the Lacey Act, a conservation law in the United States that prohibits trade in wildlife products that have been illegally taken. Groenewald had duped American hunters into believing they were shooting permitted rhino on his farm in South Africa. The extradition orders turned down by the South African government, and the Musina Mafia remain out on bail for another year before the matter is scheduled to be heard again. Despite more than 50 million passengers transiting through larger Southeast Asian airports annually, properly trained and vigilant customs officials with functioning equipment do manage to identify rhino horns smuggled in luggage. But the norm for detection of smuggled contraband is estimated to be only about 10%. Smaller illegal wildlife goods like this ivory bangle or this rhino horn bracelet are simply carried through customs. High corruption levels have seen police officers escorting a rhino horn smuggler through customs. When confronted by a customs official not on the payroll, they flee, leaving the hapless traffickers to face the consequences. 21 horns were recovered.
We just passed the security checkpoint here in Hanoi, flying to Guangzhou. There's rhino horn powder, there's supposedly libation cups, but they are fake. I know that, but the powder might be the real thing. There's bracelets which are buffalo horn, but clearly could be rhino horn. So all this just sits on the side. I mean, there's also a large piece of horn which would have shown up on the computer, which is buffalo, but nevertheless they wouldn't know the difference looking at an X-ray machine. So absolutely no problem. And one of our team members had her ivory bracelet on her arm traveling. So clearly controls at these airports are not an issue. We'll now see what happens in Guangzhou when we land in China.
Combating transnational organized crime relies on intelligence gathering.
This is a part of Operation Osseous. The rhino horn is hidden in an electric coil. It was a part of big shipments exported from Prague to Hanoi by Vietnamese company. And from intelligence, we knew that something should be inside the shipment. And we checked the inside, we checked the shipment completely. And finally, we have only the electric coil. So we cut the coil and rhino horns were hidden inside. But without good intelligence, without information, it's not possible to find such type of concealment.
During our research, the Laotian capital had been mentioned as the source of rhino horn artifacts in the region. The obvious place to start our investigation was Chinatown. Sure enough, most shops we visited openly displayed illegal wildlife products. Libation cups, slabs as well as horn shavings for use in TCM. We collected samples from a number of stores while complying with DNA chain of evidence protocols. If this material was indeed genuine, we'd stumbled onto the mother lode. A particularly well-outfitted upmarket store was offering a wide variety of quality finished rhino horn products. And another first for our investigation: pre-cut rhino horn slabs for clients wanting to produce bespoke items. During our conversation with the owner, we learned that most of their custom was from China, after being smuggled in from Vietnam, where it was manufactured. The prices quoted were similar to those at the King's Roman Casino retail shop, but with so much fake material in circulation, again, only proper laboratory testing could confirm that. The lab results again show an overwhelming positive result, confirming that most of the material from artifact shops now being tested is rhino horn. But what's disturbing is that there are very few DNA matches on the lab's database. In fact, less than 10%. The question is why? And where is the rest of the supply being sourced from?
I don't know. I just get the sense that we may not be seeing all the carcasses. Probably the majority. I wouldn't say it's the majority we're not getting. But places as vast as Kruger, it's really difficult to find every single dead animal there.
I think what has happened, particularly in 2016 and 2017, we have seen an increase in detections of rhino horns seized overseas. We've seen that in countries like Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, even the Netherlands, where we are seeing an increase in terms of seizures, which means a lot of the customs officials in those countries are a lot more vigilant. I think what we are, however, finding is even though we then engage directly with CITES management authorities in those countries, we do find there's quite a big delay in terms of those samples coming back to us, or in some cases, those samples don't come back to us at all. And I think one of the big issues is understanding where these seizures are taking place. So unless it's reported in the media often, even though there have been commitments made through CITES to inform us that there's been a seizure of rhino horn, we often don't get that message back to us. So I think where we have gotten the samples back, we are picking up linkages to poached animals. But generally speaking, if you look at the number of seizures internationally compared to the numbers of samples we're getting back, we're really not getting back the amount that we need to get back in order to really map those routes.
Okay, so almost exactly a year ago to the day that the Hanoi Conference on Wildlife Trading took place, we have come back to Nikkei village, one of the most prominent wildlife trading spots in Southeast Asia. Since then, the word has gone out. A lot of NGOs have appeared on the scene, have made an issue out of what goes on here in Nikkei village. It's now all under the table or internet-based. In the front, it's now all timber products, no longer any ivory and rhino horn. Also, in the first place, the woman did pull out a wide range of ivory chains, and her husband immediately warned her and said, "These are foreigners, don't show them this stuff." A lot more affluence, new buildings, Mercedes. There's actually massage parlors and spas here, coffee shops with swimming pools. So the affluence shows. But today, it's hard to see ivory or rhino horn. So it's all under the table on the internet now.
To confirm our suspicion that the illicit trade had migrated to the web, we joined our colleague in Guangzhou. She'd managed to place an order online from Hong Kong and gave the name of our hotel as the delivery address.
It's a trading website, right?
Yeah, it's an online trading platform. Obviously, the largest trading platform in China. Like, you can buy everything on Taobao, from furniture to clothing and to stuff like this.
But I mean, there must be some government restrictions on it. I mean, you can't trade drugs on it or whatever.
Yeah, they have surveillance on that.
They have surveillance. But now we ordered stuff which is essentially illegal, which is in here. So why don't they have surveillance on this?
Let me be clear. It wasn't like very open on Taobao saying that they're selling this stuff.
Yeah.
So what I did was I found that they are selling some precious jewelry on Taobao, and I contacted this seller. And then this seller asked me to contact her via WeChat. So I WeChat her, text her, and then we made friends on WeChat. And then there was this profile on WeChat saying she has all these stocks. And then so she just sent me the pictures on his profile. And then we talk about the goods, the price.
So she must have clients which do this every day like you and order on a regular basis from her.
Apparently, she has a lot of clients, as she told me. Because as I asked her whether you're real or not, she has showed me proof of other clients' orders.
Okay.
So and some of this proof that she showed was some conversations she had, screen caps of conversations she had with other clients. They don't say expressly this is rhino horn, but then you can see that in the caption she said there is some features like this is the patterns like some fishy patterns. And which she previously told me that the fishy patterns is a features of a rhino horn.
Okay. So do you have any, this is all rhino horn, this is all the tips. Jesus, she has a lot of stuff.
She updates it every day. See, I just browsed 2 days of updates only.
Okay, I mean, we learned a lot with this exercise. I mean, it seems, that a lot of this trade is now going not underground, but going on the web. It's disturbing because it means
whatever China is going to do about not having this in shops, it will go on the web page.
The censorship exercised on the web by Chinese authorities leads one to believe that monitoring and shutting down illegal wildlife trade sites and deliveries should be a formality. But with around 100 million e-commerce parcels being delivered in China daily, policing this market just isn't a reality. So, while the armchair conservationists and keyboard commandos debate the future of Africa's rhino far away from the real issues on the ground in the real world of conservation, 3 rhino die every day. As national parks improve their anti-poaching measures, the poachers turn to softer targets, like small game ranch owners who can't afford adequate security. Unsure about how to deal with a crisis that appears to have no end in sight, or solution offered by a government that itself is in turmoil, many wildlife owners are selling off their rhino.
Buried the horn, the whole carcass, we've buried the horn, we've covered it with concrete, because we are absolutely against this whole issue around legalizing a rhino horn trade. We don't believe it's going to offer a solution. It's an untested situation. We believe that there are too many organizations that are just carrying their own interests at heart. Nobody really knows what's going to happen, but ultimately this is what we're doing. We're making a firm statement.
I've yet to see that the awareness is seeping into finance ministries who control the purse strings in so many countries, and into police, into justice ministries, interior ministries, who in many cases still have to grasp the fact that we're dealing with organised crime here, just like narcotics or human trafficking, and that this is undermining the rule of law. It's not simply the damage that it's doing to the species, it's a corrupting influence that they must address.
People like Sergei Yastremsky, former advisor to Presidents Putin and Yeltsin, and now a committed conservationist, believes that given the political will, poaching can be stopped.
I born in a communist party, and I was in the communist system for many years, and I know very well that if they want to change something, they can do it. For sure, they know everybody who is involved in this business.
A sentiment shared by Tuan Ben Dixon, head of the Vietnam NGO Animals Asia.
If the government really want to stop it, they can. They can really stop it tomorrow. I mean, we are living in a single state or single party country where there's only one party, one government who decides everything. So that means that they can put out laws, they can put out directive or resolution that will stop anything that need to be stopped. But the question is that would they want to do it?
Okay, we're back here in the traditional medicine market of Hanoi, where it all started 6-7 years ago. We started buying up samples from medicine shops of rhino horn, which we took for DNA analysis. 90% of those samples turned out to be fake. We then moved on and graduated to buying samples from jewelry shops and artifact outlets. And then it all changed. Suddenly 90% of the samples turned out to be the real thing. And it established beyond doubt that the market was moving from health to wealth, meaning what drives the market today is not the traditional medicine, but the artifacts and the jewelry, which are both a status symbol. Each gram of jewelry item is worth 10 times that of some rhino horn powder or shavings, and as such it's clear that's where the profit is being made. We hope with this documentary to be able to establish this fact and create some awareness and take away the excuse of "I did not know," especially from the policymakers, since not understanding the demand and not understanding the market will be detrimental to trying to solve the rhino poaching problem.
The organizations that have been mandated as custodians of conserving wildlife on the planet have lost their way. For the men and women who have to pick up the pieces, it's becoming more and more difficult every day.
I don't think I can ever get used to this. In fact, for me, it's getting worse. You know, the total disregard for life that these people show almost on a weekly basis. And as I say, it's getting worse. You know, the gunshot wounds, you know, this kind of poaching. It's just incredible, and I think emotionally, it's not only on me, I've spoken to other vets as well. It does take its toll, so it's not easy to see dead rhino, to see, you know, these kind of poachings, to see rhino where they've got bullet wounds, where they've got massive fractures and they can't get up, and they struggle and they hit their head as they try to get up. It's just, you know, I know it's something that we have to deal with, but it's really not easy.